Hello, NAFI members and flight instructors. John Niehaus, Director of Program Development for the National Association of Flight Instructors, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the NAFI More Right Rudder podcast, the podcast for flight instructors on the go. And today I have a very special guest with me. And in fact, the company he works for is going to be the sponsor of this episode. And Kevin is the Director of Marketing and Special Projects, and he works for PilotEdge. And so PilotEdge will be the sponsor of this episode. So thanks again for joining us today, and thanks for PilotEdge for sponsoring the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me on, John. Yeah, so PilotEdge is it's a service where they provide air traffic control for flight simulators. So flight simulators dating back to several decades ago have never really had a good way to talk to air traffic control. Some of them, most of them nowadays have some sort of synthetic AI base where you can hit a number on the keyboard or click a response item with your mouse, and that will dictate to the computer what you're trying to convey to air traffic control. And overall, that's gotten pretty good. But what it doesn't do is work your flying brain, and especially for student pilots, what it doesn't do is overcome that mic fright, and also allow them to learn what to say. It's one thing to be able to read what the computer is saying for you, but to actually articulate it in your own words and have the courage to key the mic and talk to a real person is something that the flight simulators in the past have not done natively. So back about 10 years ago, PilotEdge was born, and founder and CEO Keith Smith, who is still CEO today, he built PilotEdge from the ground up with the premise that you could fly your flight simulator and you could talk to a real person who is on the other end as an air traffic controller. So these controllers are anywhere from former FAA to we've had current FAA and military, student FAA controllers, and also just some hobbyists who just know a lot about air traffic control, whether they be airline pilots or whatever. Regardless of who is on the other side, they will all know what to do, and they all know how to be air traffic controllers in the sim. It's the quality that PilotEdge guarantees to make sure that you are getting top-notch service that you cannot differentiate from the real world. And so anyways, that's what PilotEdge does. They provide live ATC, real air traffic control for flight simulators. You can talk with your headset, with your computer sim to an actual person. They'll talk back. It is just like the real thing.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about PilotEdge, but that's not why we're here today specifically. And we certainly thank PilotEdge for sponsoring this podcast. But anyways, what we really want to talk about today is a special project, which is part of your title,
yes,
for PilotEdge, and that's SimVenture, right? And SimVenture has happened. This is the third annual one this year,
correct.
I believe. And SimVenture actually happens before AirVenture. It's going to be July 14th through 17th of this year. Yes. And let's talk a little bit about what this is and how people can participate.
Sure. So SimVenture is basically, just to sum it up, it's a virtual Oshkosh, but it's not really the air show part. It's all based off of the fly-in portion and even the fly-out, the arrival and the departure. Anyone who's familiar with Oshkosh at all, it knows likely the phrase "rock your wings." This is such a powerful phrase for any pilot who has ever flown into AirVenture. For those who are unfamiliar, AirVenture, it's a Oshkosh up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, at the end of every July. They have a big air show. 10,000 airplanes fly in. And it's a small, well, not really a small class Delta, but usually it's a very non-busy class Delta. It's actually just a contract tower. It's not even FAA for the 51 weeks out of the year. And then that 1 week when EAA comes in and just takes over, there are FAA controllers who volunteer their time to go up and just work the show. They volunteer because they love it and it's that fun. It is the most pure form of air traffic control with these separation waivers and all this. So anyways, when you're flying into Oshkosh, you have to follow a specific NOTAM. It's not just, call up the tower 10 miles from the airport. In fact, you don't even call the tower at all. The NOTAM has you follow specific in the event of the Fisk arrival, you follow railroad tracks to a town of Ripon, then Fisk. You even have transition points ahead of before those that they rolled out last year in 2021. And you just tune a frequency, and once you get over the town of Fisk, they'll tell you to rock your wings. They do that so they know that you are listening to them. If you don't rock your wings, they assume that you're not hearing them, and they'll treat you as a NORDO, a no radio aircraft. So anyways, it's a very non-standard procedure. And because of that, it can be kind of daunting for someone who might be new to just flying to Oshkosh, or even kind of a newer pilot who wants to go to Oshkosh. I've heard a lot of stories of pilots who maybe fly into Appleton or maybe just somewhere closer to Milwaukee because they're just a little bit, and they'll Uber, or they'll drive up to Oshkosh to the show. And just because they're a little bit, unsure of the whole procedures, they don't want to kind of get involved in all that. But I'd highly, highly advise anyone who's in that category of being a little bit timid, check out SimVenture. So SimVenture is a way you can practice and prepare to fly into Oshkosh, fly into AirVenture ahead of time with your flight simulator, your home flight simulator. So whether you have X-Plane, Microsoft Flight Simulator, Lockheed Martin's Prepared, any one of these softwares, you can practice ahead of time with PilotEdge's SimVenture event. And so what we're doing, we are staffing up the area around Oshkosh. And we've done this for, like you said, this will be our third year. We work with NACA, which is the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. And they supply us with a group of controllers who actually work the real AirVenture. So that's really the kicker with this, is that, typically on a regular PilotEdge day, it's the PilotEdge controllers who I already, kind of listed what their background is. But for SimVenture, working the Oshkosh area, whether it's Fisk Approach or Oshkosh Tower, it is the actual controllers who will be working the show or have worked the show in the past, just a week after SimVenture. So being July 14th through 17th, it's about a week and a half before AirVenture. It's a great time frame for anyone who's looking to get prepared and gain some confidence before you actually hit the show in the real airplane. And whether you are planning to go or not, even if you're just looking to do this for fun, we welcome you to do it. Come on the network, experience the Fisk arrival, see what it's like to rock your wings, and really get your heart pumping when an ATC is just going a mile a minute. Planes all around you. You'll see them all in the sim. You'll see the airplane a half mile in front of you. You'll see them rock their wings, and then that you're likely next.
So how does all this work? I mean, it sounds really cool. How does somebody get themselves connected into this?
Yeah, so getting connected to PilotEdge is a very simple process. It does require just a very small third additional program that will run within X-Plane. It just runs as a plugin. If anyone's familiar with that, with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, it's just a very small external program that runs in the background of FS 2020. And so with those, you just basically hit the connect button. You type in the call sign, so November 123 Alpha Bravo, and all of a sudden you're connected. And so what that little piece of software is doing in your computer is taking the data from your simulator, injecting that into PilotEdge's server, and then the server takes all that data. This is your lat longs, your heading, your ground speed, whatever it is, even your pitch and roll. It takes all that data as well. And it's fetching that. I believe it's 5 times a second, and it's taking all that data and it's pumping it into the server, and then pumps it out to the controller's radar screens. And so they are able to then work the traffic like they would. So that's what the software is doing, kind of behind the scenes. But as the user, for you all as a pilot, it's very simple. It's just a one-time setup where you just download a program off the website, of PilotEdge's website, I should say. You get it all set up, and then every time you want to connect to the network, you just have to run that program and select connect, and you're in. And you tune the real-world frequencies. Like I said, you use your headset to actually talk. You set your push to talk on your yoke, joystick, keyboard, whatever you might have, and it is it's as real as it gets.
Oh, that's really neat. And for SimVenture, I mean, is there a limit to how many times you can do that, or are there multiple
We
different
encourage people
scenarios?
to do it as many times as they want. So we, like you said, July 14th through 17th, 4-day event. It's going to run about 3 to 4 hours every day. We haven't yet published the specific times yet, but we do try and hit several different time windows. So therefore, if people are in Europe or people, West Coast, East Coast, whatever your schedule might be, hopefully you can at least hit part of a window in one of the 4 days. It's a Thursday through Sunday. And you can visit pilotedge.net/SimVenture, SIMVENTURE, in case you are, depending on when you're listening to this, we might already have those times posted. But to answer your question, yes, you can fly as many times as you want. We encourage people to fly multiple times. And the reason that's also beneficial to you as a pilot is that we will run different configurations, different runway flows each day. And we actually also have a cool kind of, I think it's cool, a cool feature that will be on the pilotedge.net/SimVenture website once those times are released, where we will allow pilots to, well, let me say this, we will hide the planned runway flows. So we always know, what the flows are going to be. We do require users to have clear skies and clear to million visibility, essentially, calm winds. We would run into issues if one person had some clouds and another person didn't. So that's one of the simisms that we do require. Is it's always a beautiful day at SimVenture. You can always guarantee that. And
Sounds like a tagline.
You'll hear the controllers say it sometimes. Yeah, you can go to the SimVenture website, pilotedge.net/SimVenture, that is, once all the times are posted. And we hide the runway configurations by default. That way, if you want to be surprised, you can be, like you would be in the real airplane, right? You would approach Oshkosh. Sure, you would know the winds potentially, but obviously it's something could change. And so you can approach Oshkosh, grab the ATIS, and be surprised. So you have to mentally react, just several minutes before you're flying the approach. Or you can select to show the runway configuration if you are looking to plan a little bit. Say, hey, I really want to shoot a 1.8 approach. I really want to shoot an approach to 2.7. I really, or 3.6. We'll run all these configurations throughout the course of the 4 days, and you as the user will have the opportunity to, kind of be surprised or plan ahead. And that is the benefit to flying this multiple times. We encourage pilots when they land, they can either taxi to the ramp and, at that point, when I say ramp, I mean grass, taxi into the North 40 or one of the 2 designated parking areas in the grass that we have, and just disconnect, or they can just kind of hang out there. We also have really cool scenery that we produce for FS 2020 as well as X-Plane. So some people like to just kind of move the camera around, explore that, watch watch some other people land, listen to the radios, or you can land and turn off in the grass like you would, and then taxi right back for takeoff. So we have flagmen within the scenery who will direct you to how to get to takeoff or parking. Cool. And so you can just head right back to takeoff. And, that's where it's a little bit different than the actual show, where typically it's, mass arrivals. And then you have towards the end of the day, mass departures, and then mass arrivals and mass departures. In our SimVenture, it's kind of constant arrival departure flow, because a lot of people understandably want to get this done several times. But the great part about that is you can practice the departures just as many times as you practice the arrival. The NOTAM, by the way, the NOTAM, we use the exact NOTAM procedures of the real EAA NOTAM. So you can expect to have, we do produce our own version of the NOTAM. The reason for that is just because we do include some other little just helpful tips there. We'll include some visual landmarks to help you spot some of the things in the sim, help you understand what you're looking for as far as where the railroad tracks are, where the gravel pit is, north runway 27 and 9. And then just a few other little simism things as far as, setting your weather to clear skies and so forth. So we do produce our own NOTAM, but it does, it's derived from the EAA NOTAM. And so therefore, if you are planning to fly the real show, you will not pick up any bad habits by using our procedures. So everything's really, outlined in there. And what I was saying was the departures are also, NOTAM procedures where, if you're off of, X runway, you fly, whatever heading to leave the Delta airspace at or below this altitude. And so you can practice all these things and just kind of keep going around and around. You can probably shoot 3 to 4 approaches per hour. So, every day you could probably get in at least 5 or 6 approaches if you wanted to, and really, really feel confident about flying to AirVenture.
So, being a flight instructor podcast, I have to always bring this back to the flight instructor community.
Sure.
I mean, that's just the world that I live in.
Of course.
Is this structured in a way where I could take a student and sort of do almost like a training flight into into
Totally.
AirVenture, where
Yeah.
it's not so much training the approach, but I'm also training the student at the same time? Is it conceivable that I could do that?
Absolutely. I mean, so there are several different ways that you as a flight instructor could work with your student on this, as far as hearing the radios. Of course, you could have the radios coming out of an external speaker, so the whole basically the whole room you're in would hear the radio. Or if you're familiar with if you're kind of tech savvy, you know how to hook up two headsets and kind of use a splitter. You could do that out of the computer. There's also an app you can get. That you can listen to live audio from PilotEdge on that. So there are several different ways you can do that from a student instructor perspective. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for a student pilot who may be taking their instructor, or vice versa, to be able to brief this ahead of time and really just go in and experience what you're going to experience in the real airplane when you go to AirVenture. And again, whether you're going to go to AirVenture or not, we welcome you. We welcome the hobbyists. We welcome the people who just aren't afforded the opportunity to go to AirVenture, whether it's ever or just this year, because realistically, we need the masses of traffic as well to make this a realistic event. If there are just 5 people who show up, then it's not going to be very exciting. But in the past, we've had over 1,000 operations in the 4 days. I think in 2020. We had 1,100, and then I think we hit 1,200 last year. So we'll see what we do this year, but it's pretty neat. We have a lot of people come out shooting a lot of different approaches. Obviously, all VFR. It's also, when I say approaches, it's just approaches to the runways per the NOTAM, but it's as real as it can get.
What if I'm, I know we keep talking about this from a stance of this is supposed to train you to go into AirVenture, and it's supposed to be fun too, of course. But what if I'm, a little bit less confident? I've never been to AirVenture before. Maybe I'm even a private pilot, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to do this, and I'm concerned that I'm going to go the wrong way, do the wrong thing, screw it up.
Sure.
Is that what are your thoughts on a pilot who's just sort of not even confident necessarily going into this and doesn't want to screw it up?
Well, there are several ways you can approach that, and I think it kind of depends on the kind of person that the pilot you're describing would be. We do need some sort of level of proficiency with the pilots who attempt AirVenture, only because it doesn't scale well with a lot of people going the wrong direction, not knowing what they're doing. To be perfectly honest with you, when we did this first in 2020. I had no idea how it was going to go. I was prepared for a disaster, and I was extremely impressed with the amount of people. The very first thing that impressed me was about we released the NOTAM about a week or two ahead of time, our version of NOTAM, that is. And what impressed me was seeing about 15 people, probably the day we released the NOTAM, just out connected to PilotEdge, just out practicing the procedure. There was no ATC there. This was a week or two before the event, and we don't, the cover. Oshkosh is not in the everyday coverage area for PilotEdge, but they were just practicing, and it put a big smile on my face. Like, people are going to take this really seriously. Again, this is before we ever did this, so we weren't sure how it was going to go. Do your homework. Read through the NOTAM. We're going to have a review session just about a week and a half or so before AirVenture. You can follow at PilotEdge ATC on social media, Facebook and Instagram, to see more information about that. It'll also be on the YouTube channel at PilotEdge ATC. Depending on when you're listening to this, it might have already happened. Or, of course, pilotedge.net/SimVenture. It'll be there as well. So there'll be a whole NOTAM review. And also just look at YouTube for just people's videos, whether it's real world videos of AirVenture or past SimVenture. If you just type in SimVenture to YouTube, you're going to find a lot of people who have posted their their flights from the past 2 SimVentures that we've had. And you can just watch and just kind of gauge if it's for you. Now, if you don't look at the NOTAM and you don't really know what's going on when you first look at that, it's probably going to feel really daunting. So that's why SimVenture is so great, though, because you can get used to that. And also, one thing that a lot of people don't realize going in, I think, is that when you, for those who aren't familiar with the procedure, you start the procedure about 30 miles outside of the Fisk, which is where you're going to be doing your first wing rock. It's kind of where the first important thing happens. And during these 30 miles or so, you're in a single file line, hopefully following the airplane in front of you, at least a half mile in trail. You have a certain altitude maintained, typically 800, 1,800 feet. And again, this is all in the NOTAM. You don't have to be taking notes now, but you get to Fisk, and you have heard 30 miles worth, which is roughly 15 minutes or so. I guess you're doing 80 knots, so or 90 knots. I'm sorry, you're doing 90 knots, so it's 15 to 20 minutes, and you've heard 15 to 20 minutes of people basically basically approaching Fisk, and so you kind of you're able to kind of get the idea of, okay, when I get to Fisk, they're going to tell me to rock my wings. When I rock my wings, they're going to tell me which runway to go to. And you're going to be continue up the railroad tracks or make a right turn down Fisk Avenue. And you're going to kind of hopefully be able to grasp this whole thing. So there's a little bit of learning that I think that can be that can happen while you're flying in SimVenture. And that's also what makes it so great. Anyways, that's the long answer of, don't be afraid to try SimVenture. It's going to be a great experience, regardless of your skill level, and it's only going to make your experience at AirVenture, if you're planning on going, all the better, because you're going to feel more confident. You're going to be a safer pilot, and just all around more competent with the procedure.
And it sounds like the controllers are there in understanding that part of this, or a good portion of this, is to learn. So if you do mess up, or you do kind of go the wrong way, then they understand that hopefully you're doing it in the sim, which is what sims are for.
Exactly.
So when you do it in real life, you do it a little bit more correctly.
And I'll kind of make an aside of that too, and say that just on the PilotEdge network in general, the controllers are there to make sure you learn. Now, if you may have heard of PilotEdge before, you may have seen clips. The controllers have a difficult multitude of hats to wear, where they try and do some light instruction, but at the same time, they also need to play the role of an actual control. I'm talking, non-SimVenture for a second here. Just on the everyday PilotEdge network, the controllers have to play the role of what a controller would actually be saying in the situation. So, we have a few people who will log on to PilotEdge, and they take off and they bust the Bravo airspace, and the controller will call them out. November 123, violation of the whatever Bravo airspace, flighting 360, immediately to exit Bravo. And they use the phraseology, possible pilot deviation. Now there's no phone number to call, but there actually is PilotEdge does keep a log of these things to track trends and tendencies for training purposes.
Wow.
PilotEdge will reach out to you, not in a bad way, but it's not meant to be an embarrassment. They don't post it anywhere. But they'll reach out to you and say, hey, we noticed you've had 3 Bravo busts in the past week. We might recommend you try our free training program. That's a self-guided VFR training program. That kind of just urges people in the right way of, hey, this whole flying on your own thing might not be working for you. How about you try, you're still flying on your own, but it's a self-guided training program. So some people get a little bit jarred by the fact that ATC is, I don't know, scolding is a rough word, but I'm going to use it anyways. But they're really not. They're trying to play the role of an actual controller, where if you were to bust the Bravo in the real world, you would hear this, and likely in a much more rude tone. And the FAA might be waiting for you on the ramp when you land too. So be happy it's a sim, and be happy that the learning is occurring in a virtual environment. Try and get something out of the mistake. Mistakes are some of the best ways that we can learn as aviators, as people. You learn from your mistakes, and hopefully you take corrective action. You don't do it again in the future. But so anyways, I just kind of, just a bit of an aside as to PilotEdge in general, where the controllers are there to help you. Obviously, they understand it's a training network. 95% of the people there are training. The other 5% are just kind of hobbyists who, just like flight simulators. But most of the people there are training, or at least just flying to maintain proficiency. and which I think is great. And if you're not a flight simulator user, or if you have maybe a poor connotation of flight simulators or what they can do, I urge you to really focus in on what kind of goal you could gain from a flight simulator. You may, if you have this kind of poor taste in your mouth about sims, just keep in mind that sims aren't created to feel like the real airplane. I mean, sure, that I'm sure the companies do their best to do that, but realistically, a $200 flight sim yoke sitting on your desktop is not going to feel like your Bonanza or whatever you have sitting in your hangar. And you just have to go into the experience knowing that. But what you can get out of it is talking to ATC, shooting ILSs, working with your instrumentation, learning the G1000, whatever it might be. There are so many different goals that you can hone in on. And it doesn't just have to be one, it can be several goals, but try and take it one at a time. And so I encourage you, if you've had a bad experience with the simulator, don't let the lack of feeling of a real airplane deter you from using sims. Try them again and try it with a specific goal in mind. If you can't grease the landing, it doesn't matter. No one is there to judge you. No, you're not going to have to take it over to your mechanic because you popped 2 tires when you hit the runway. If you veer off the side of the runway when you land, who cares? It doesn't, these things don't matter. What matters is that you're gaining proficiency. Proficiency is a safety word. It's not, we're not talking currency here. Proficiency is a safety word. You can do this thing, you can do these things from your home when you have a free 30 minutes right after you put the kid down at night, and before you have to go to bed, versus it takes you 4 hours to go shoot a few approaches. If you drive out to the airport, you can shoot 2 approaches in 30 minutes if you just fire up the sim real quick, and ATC is going to be there for you on the PilotEdge network. So try and, if you've had a bad experience with sims in the past, you can get back into them. I highly encourage it. PilotEdge has some resources too to get hooked up with flight simulators. I would say the best way to do that would be to reach out to PilotEdge on social media, at PilotEdge ATC, again on Facebook or Instagram. You can also email support@pilotedge.net. That'd be a different kind of way to go around it, but social media, if you have it, is likely going to be the easiest and best way to get in touch with people who can help you get set up with sims. And that kind of also brings back to SimVenture. If you're listening to this with enough time before July 14th and you're interested in taking advantage of SimVenture, if you already have a decent computer, and assuming the thing is not running like a snail, you can likely run X-Plane 11 decently. X-Plane 11 is now a 6-year-old sim. I think it dropped in 2016, and it doesn't take all that much computing power. So if you already have the computer, you can get X-Plane 11 for $60, and you can get a joystick for about $30 down at Walmart, Best Buy, Amazon, you name it. And all of a sudden you're up and running for SimVenture for less than $100. It doesn't take long, and PilotEdge has resources to help you along the way if you need a little bit of help as well. So please take advantage of that. I don't want anyone thinking it's going to be a too daunting of a process to get set up with a sim. And I would recommend, though, to fly in SimVenture, make sure you can at least handle your airplane. I said all the things about landing, and don't be afraid if you can't land. You should still be able to, fly the airplane. Turn a base, turn final, whatever it might be. Those are things that you should be able to adapt to in the sim. The fine course corrections to actually land the airplane, maybe a different story, but actually flying the airplane, it's something that we can, it's not too hard to get the hang of.
Yeah, as a instructor, it's really nice for me to hear some of this stuff, because in my head, I'm thinking about clients I've had, students I've had, and they might say, well, I can just log in and to my own simulator, and I can take the NOTAM and I can fly the approach myself, and do all of that stuff. And the thing that you cannot replicate by yourself is the stress of having to juggle that extra ball, right?
Absolutely.
It's one thing to be able to fly the airplane and be able to pause and do all the sort of creature comforts of sitting in your own home. It's another thing to have to be able to fly the airplane and talk to ATC and look for traffic and do all these things that adds those extra layers of stress. And those stressors are where you're going to be potentially finding yourself in uncomfortable territory in real life. Things you cannot replicate by just logging in to your own flight sim and flying it, at your leisure. So I agree. I think it's a huge opportunity for flight instructors, students, and pilots alike to log in and just prepare a little bit for themselves and sort of learn how that applies in the real world. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity, I think it's really cool of PilotEdge to put something like this on.
Well, John, yeah, and you hit it there with the word that I like to use is accountability with flight simulators, and being able to for those who haven't used a sim, either haven't used a sim or haven't used a sim with actual live live air traffic control. When you add the live air traffic control to the sim, it does something to your head. And I'm no scientist. I can't explain it, but it puts your flying brain to work, where you are now having to focus on everything you would in the real cockpit, listening up for your call sign amongst other traffic. It's a PilotEdge is a dynamic network. This is not a one-to-one controller to pilot situation. The controller is working 10, 15 other airplanes, and you're going to hear all that. You're going to hear the pilots talk, you're going to hear the controller talk to them. You have to listen to your call sign just like you would in the real airplane. And so by adding ATC and this multiplayer environment to your sim, gone are the days of loading up on the runway, throttling up and just blasting off, and then thinking about, okay, how do I get to the final approach fix, or how do I get to the initial approach fix to start the hold. It's all about PilotEdge is really, you start on the ramp and you kind of go through a full flight. You could start in the air as well if you're in Class Echo or Golf airspace, but you certainly wouldn't want to start in controlled airspace. But ideally, you're doing an end-to-end flight where you start on the ramp and you fire up the airplane, you get the ATIS, you call ground, and they will give you taxi instructions, using the actual taxi charts. You can use ForeFlight or whatever EFB you might have, or paper charts if that's your method. And you can go, you have an actual flight, and the accountability comes in. You get to the runway, and without ATC, if you were to start on the ramp without ATC, you'd probably get to the runway and you would just take the runway. You might think about, clear final, whatever. But in the back of your head, without being connected to PilotEdge and without ATC, there's no one there. That it doesn't matter. That even if there is someone there, they're just gonna, go right through your airplane. You might get a little chuckle out of it, and that'll be it. You are cheating yourself out of such a valuable learning opportunity by taking that approach. And so then, now if you connect your sim to PilotEdge, very easy process to do that. And if you then start talking to ATC, now you have a reason to hold short the runway, because ATC is holding you accountable to do that. Why? Because they told you to hold short. Why? Because there might be an airplane on short final that you're going to cut right in front of. If you were to pull out on the runway, now you are ruining someone else's experience because they are on short final, and someone's just going to blast right out on the runway in front of them. And that's not fair to them. So the accountability aspect will improve your sim experience tenfold by allowing you to really put your head in the game and really treat it like the real airplane. It's everything that you've done in your sim, and then taking it to the next level that you never knew was possible. So I encourage you to try it. And if you've tried it before and maybe you've had trouble or something, try it again and try and really focus in on those goals of what you're looking to do in the cockpit of your sim.
Yeah, that's it's such a cool thing. And folks, as we start to wind this down, first and foremost, Kevin, I really appreciate your time here. Thanks for coming on, especially at short notice. We'll tell that story at some point. But if folks, if you want more information, certainly you can go to pilotedge.net. And on there, they also have their pages dedicated to SimVenture. Remember the dates, July 14th through 17th. And Kevin, at some point, we're going to have a talk because in these emails that you send out about possible pilot deviations, maybe they need to say possible pilot deviation, find a NAFI instructor.
Hey, yeah, that'd be a good. I'm sure a lot of them could benefit from that.
Well, any final thoughts before we go?
No, I just, again, recommend everyone, give PilotEdge a try, and then further SimVenture, especially if you're planning on going to AirVenture, especially if you know someone who's flying AirVenture, tell your friends, tell whoever you know is heading to AirVenture. You can find our posts on our social media at PilotEdge ATC. Give us a follow, share the post, get the word out, because our primary goal here is just to make AirVenture safer and make pilots flying the AirVenture just all the more confident with the procedures, just for a better experience for everybody.
Safer pilots and safer instructors. That's what we're all about here at NAFI as well. And
Absolutely.
there you have it. So, folks, if thank you for listening, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're there. And specifically on Apple Podcasts, if you happen to like our presentation, please go ahead and rate it. 5 stars if you could. If you don't like it, still rate it 5 stars. But we appreciate the input. So thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you. And until next time.